Stephen Bedard here, and we are going to take a look at Revelation chapter 4. And in many ways, this chapter really introduces the apocalyptic aspect of the book. The other things that we've seen previously in the book may have had some sort of eschatological part to it, but really in the fourth chapter, we are entering into what would traditionally be called an apocalypse. And it is here that John has his revelation and has his experience in heaven of what Jesus would like to reveal to him. And this idea of a heavenly journey really is one of the core aspects of apocalyptic literature. We can find that in other texts of this same genre. So one example would be 1 Enoch, specifically 1 Enoch 14, verses 9 to 13. And John talks about a door of heaven, and that's likely a reference to the Revelation. The door to heaven is the revelation that is given as John is given a vision of what is to come. And this idea of experiencing something in heaven, however that might be, the Apostle Paul experienced something similar to this. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, he's referring to himself here, and he says this, "I know a person in Christ who, 14 years ago, was caught up to the third heaven, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows." And there Paul is saying he doesn't know if he physically was transported to heaven or if it was just a vision. And in the same way, we can't really know exactly what happened to John. Did he physically go up into heaven, or is the reference to coming up more symbolic in terms of in his mind and his spirit understanding what is going on? Also, that reference to coming up, when John is told to come up here, I need to make it very, very clear that that is not a reference to the rapture. I remember many years ago, as I was in a church that was very heavily into rapture theology, and I would ask, well, I'm not really seeing the rapture in the book of Revelation. And someone pointed me to Revelation chapter 4 and said, well, look right there. It says, come up here. What else could that be other than the rapture of the church? Well, what it is calling specifically John up there, however that might have looked. So it's a reference to John. It's a reference to this apocalyptic experience that is part of this genre, and it really has nothing to do with a rescue operation of the church. Now, I understand if you are already convinced of rapture theology, and especially if you believe that the rapture must take place before any tribulation, you need to find a rapture in the book of Revelation before all of the bad things start happening. And this is as good a place as any, but that is not what these words are saying. Now, I'm not saying you can't believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. If you do, that's fine, but this particular verse is not a reference to that. And so John has a vision of the throne of God, which is something that is found in other apocalyptic literature. It's also found in some other books of the Old Testament as well. And John is really drawing upon a lot of Old Testament imagery here. And the reference to the rainbow specifically is probably going back to Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 28, where Ezekiel has a vision of the throne of God and sees something like that. And then we get these 24 elders that are seen in heaven. Who are the 24 elders? Well, I think I was taught at some point that they were the 12 patriarchs of the 12 sons of Israel and the 12 apostles. I'm not sure where I learned that, but that's what I was taught at some point. Now, there's some problems with that, because which of the 12 sons do we go with? Because it ends up that Joseph is divided among his sons, but still, you could make it work if you wanted to. We don't really know exactly who the 24 are. They're first of all, as to what they are. One idea is that they may be angels, and that's certainly a possibility. Others have suggested that they are all Old Testament saints, so people like perhaps the patriarchs. And some have suggested that the 24 are just representative of all believers, all followers of Jesus, and the number 24 is purely symbolic, which is very likely, as 12 is an extremely important number, not just in Revelation, but all through the Bible. And doubling it is a way of emphasis. That's something that we find in the scriptures. When people want to emphasize something, they will double it. And so talking about 12 as the chosen number, doubling that just means those who are especially chosen, which could be the followers of Jesus. Another idea that I came across is that it is possibly a reference to the 24 divisions of the priests that are described in 1 Chronicles chapter 24, verse 4. I'm not sure that I buy that. I think I would probably go that they represent the faithful followers of Jesus, but we can't really know. What's important is what they do, and that they fall down and they worship. They are described as being dressed in white, which is a color that describes purity, and it also talks about them being making it through difficult times, and they come out the other side completely pure, completely white in that way. They have crowns, and what are those crowns? Well, again, that's not really described in detail. We should note, though, that the Apostle Paul, when he was looking towards his own death, he spoke of the crown of righteousness. That's in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 8. And perhaps that is what is being described here. But I think what's really important here is what they do. That they do not rejoice in their own crowns, but rather they bow down and remove their crowns in worship to God. That's really the focus of what's going on here. There's a description of a sea in verse 6, and that probably, again, is looking back to the bronze sea that was built into Solomon's temple. If you look to books like Hebrews, which talk about how the temple on earth was meant to reflect, to be a sketch of what the real temple in heaven was like, that would seem to make sense, that bronze sea in Solomon's temple is reflective of the sea that is at God's temple in Israel. In heaven, sorry. And then we have the worship that takes place here. And that's really an important part of what is going on, especially heavenly worship. What happens in heaven? Well, we see the people, whoever they are worshiping, that the angels are worshiping. And this, again, goes back to the Old Testament. Places like Isaiah chapter 6 and Ezekiel chapter 1 describe this same kind of thing. And these passages are really drawing upon those Old Testament passages. We have these four creatures that are being described in Revelation chapter 4. And this seems to be connected very much with the creatures of Ezekiel. And yet there's a difference there, because in Revelation, it's saying that each of these four angelic beings has the face of this particular animal, whereas in Ezekiel, each of the angels, they all have the face of those animals, so they would have four faces. So it's a little bit different, but it is calling upon the same image there. Really, the focus of Revelation chapter 4 is of the greatness of God, of how much he is worthy of worship. That is really what is trying to be brought across. And this is not just a theological statement, but also a political statement, because Domitian, who was the Roman emperor at the time, was demanding worship as Lord and God. And by focusing so much on the fact that only God and through Jesus, only He is worthy of worship. And that is making a statement about the role of Caesar, that Caesar is overstepping his bounds. He is not to be worshipped. Only God alone is to be worshipped. And so that ends our look at Revelation chapter 4. And next time we will get into chapter 5. Thank you for watching. Make sure to check out my website at stephenjbedard.com and take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and God bless.